Assalamu alaikum. I'm Ariana.
And I'm Hadid, and today we're hosting Hijabi Librarians' second interview with Shifa Saltagi Safadi, the 2024 winner of the National Book Award for Young People's Literature Cut in Between, published by G.P. Putnam Sons Books for Young Readers and imprint of Penguin Random House. Welcome, Shifa, and happy belated Eid.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Shifat is also the author of 2025 picture book, The Gift of Eid, published by Holiday House, and the upcoming early chapter book series, Amina Banana, published by G.P. Putnam Sons, an imprint of Penguin Random House, set to release on May 20th, 2025. So we usually start out by asking our interviewees, how do you identify yourself?
I'm a Muslim Syrian American.
All right, so now going on to the second question. So the concept of windows and mirrors recognizes literature as a powerful space for self-recognition and discovery. When and where did you see yourself reflected in literature? Or first see yourself reflected in literature? And then are there any specific titles that have resonated with your identity?
I immediately thought of Sajida S.K. Ali. Probably the first novel I saw myself in was Saints and Misfits, which was her debut novel. And it was because it was the first book that was Muslim that I read that had a hijabi main character. I don't know that I realized that I was missing Muslim representation until I read her book, because I had just gotten used to not seeing myself on a bookshelf. And so it was only when I started seeing these Muslim books that presented Islam as a good thing, how I see it in my life, that I was like, oh my God, like this actually exists. I did not start writing until I saw the Muslim books on the shelf, because I think it just made me realize like it's possible, you know?
The next question is, did you always see yourself becoming a writer? What has made the largest impact on the kinds of books that you write or want to write? And how has your career as an educator and a blogger influenced or inspired your writing?
Absolutely. The biggest impact is being a mom. It was when my oldest was about 3 or 4 that I really started to think like, I want to, have him proud of his identity. I want him to read books that reflect him and teach him Islam in a loving way, right? And like although I'm fluent in Arabic, the Arabic picture books that I got from Syria or from my mother, they weren't hitting the same way that I felt like he was reading like a book that I would get from TJ Maxx or the library. So, that just really made me want to look for Muslim books for him. They just inspire me. Like, their questions or my observations of them, or we'll be, they'll bring up a topic or something. I'll read them my stories. And sometimes they're like, we'd like a story about this or this and that. And I'll take notes. And so they're just the biggest inspiration, and I think they inspire a lot of the voices. I wanted to write, but writing is a long process. I mean, I started querying in 2019, and I didn't get an agent, I believe, until maybe 2023. But it took a while. It took like 5 years. And Kid in Between was my debut in the traditional industry, but also I had picture books that were published without an agent through a Muslim publisher. I really became so overwhelmed with the schedules of writing and marketing and school visits and stuff that it just made sense to kind of step back from the blogger space and insert fully into the author space. But I feel like it informed a lot of my relationships with books, my relationships with the reviewers, the way I approach books. I feel like reviewers have the right to review however they want, and it just made me realize also like kind of the spaces of books that are missing, like where I can fill those gaps, which I felt like the early reader space and the early chapter book space had a big gap, which is really what inspired me to pursue writing Amina.
So you have previously published books with Ruqayyah's Bookshelf, a Canadian-based children's Islamic bookstore in a publishing company. How has that transition been to mainstream publishing in the United States? What are things you expected and didn't expect?
I was fortunate enough to be published by Asma Hussein at Ruqayyah's Bookshelf for 3 picture books. And she does a wonderful job, I think, really bringing the author in. And I remember, I was early on in my picture book career. So, I was still learning the ropes and picture book craft. So she's very hands-on with editing and stuff. So, it was very much a process where I felt like she really helped transform those books into publishable quality. But I feel like my dream has always been to see my books in libraries, bookstores, and with indie Muslim publishing, it's wonderful, but you sort of only reach the Muslim audience through Muslim booksellers and through Muslim, consumers. And I wanted to expand. I wanted to reach also, a wider audience, and also have our kids be able to go to the library and check it out, reach classrooms, have teacher guides. I love being an educator, and being able to provide educators with novels that they can learn and study and help kids see themselves. So it was this dream of mine to enter the traditional space. I was lucky enough to get a mentorship with my current editor for Amina Banana. And that really helped because I learned how to, collaborate with an editor, how to take edit letters and be able to revise. And I think that's now my greatest strength. I think the things that I didn't expect was how hard it would be, but also like I didn't expect how now that like there's been so much success with it too. So I'm so grateful, that getting between especially like just opened a whole lot of doors for me in the industry. So I'm so grateful that I was able to see this dream of so many kids being able to pick up the book at the library or at Barnes and Nobles, alhamdulillah.
Writing often involves difficult choices about what to include, what to omit. Is there anything you've had to edit out of your books that you found challenging to remove? Do you feel like Muslim writers face pressure to either highlight or avoid certain aspects of Muslim identity or communities in their narratives?
So, I really, really like this question, and I'm so glad it came up because this is something that I'm asked as well. And I remember also wondering this question when I was a reviewer before I became an author. It's a yes and a no answer because I think that as Muslims that grow up in the West, we do feel the pressures of sometimes not being too Muslim. I think that's only natural, right? Or maybe the fear of, or maybe even over explaining. So I think like those are implicit things within us, but I feel like as people who study literature as well, I think we have to realize that and this is why I really, really love writing, is that I think that stories have this natural way of allowing you a vehicle that you can tell the story you want in any way you want, as long as you use good writing. I've never felt pressure to remove Islam from my books. I've never felt pressure to do anything that I'm not comfortable with ever. I and I feel like it's always been like, right, what you feel like matches this character. That's always been the advice. Like, let's think about this character and how the plot serves this character and what they would do. And so, especially with Kareem being my debut and my first book in the industry, there's a lot of Islamic parts of it that it was so interesting to see how so many people still related to this character. I mean, we related to characters who weren't Muslim. We related to characters that are animals or magicians or dragons. Like I feel like when you remember that, you have to almost decolonize your own self and be like, work on your own strength and write what you want. Just make sure the writing is solid.
Do you have other friendships or professional relationships with other authors? Obviously, your reviewers,
Absolutely.
illustrators that you get feedback from, and how have they helped you to improve your work, your lens, or your craft in general?
Absolutely. It is essential for every author, honestly, to have a good group of critique partners, whether that is like some maybe reviewers or friends that really are strong. And I often like advise to have critique partners that are in a similar career and even similar level. So I feel like I have like picture book critique partners that are writing picture books. And for my middle grades, I also have middle grade authors who I swap with. And it's so awesome to have a critique group, especially of Muslim writers, because we're all trying to do the same thing. So it's really, really important. I do have a very strong critique partner relationship, and it's the best thing ever because you can even get eyes on an idea before even I show it to my agent and editor and kind of get that feedback. I really, really enjoy critique, and I enjoy giving it and receiving it because it all serves the purpose of elevating literature. And we want to provide the best for our kids. We want them to be entertained and interested in reading good books, not just like books that they might find boring or maybe preachy, right? You want it to be engaging for them.
So so far you've written children's books in a variety of formats, right? So you have a picture book, these early chapter books that are coming out, and of course, cutting between the middle grade novel and verse.
Yes.
How have these formats challenged you as a writer? What's been the most exciting for you about this process, and what other formats or genres or target audiences are you interested in writing for?
These genres, they're similar, but they're also very different in practice. I mean, for a novel and verse, you're also writing a story that has plot and characters, but you're also dealing with more mature audiences. So for Kareem, I really had to like think about his voice and how that would work for a middle school audience, and also like focus on the poetry. So I was really challenged with my poetry with Getting Between. As you develop your craft, you start applying those skills in all the genres you do. And then picture books were my first love. They were my first entry into publishing. But I feel like I definitely gravitate towards middle grade now. I don't know that I'll ever write young adult or older, but I definitely think the more writing I'm doing, the more I just really am starting to feel myself fall more in love with middle grade.
Aaliya Jaleel has illustrated 3 of your books, The Gift of Eid and your 2 Amina Banana books. We are familiar with the traditional process of picture book illustration in which the author and illustrator mostly work in autonomy. Was this true for your process? And was it easier to work with Aaliya again, or because of the change in the format, was it like starting new?
Yeah, so Gift of Aid was my first experience working with Aaliya, and it is very much a traditional process. So typically the traditional industry, but even my experience with Ruqaya's Bookshelf, the artists work separately from the author, and the publisher sort of coordinates that. And you get to see like the sketches, provide input on it, but it's mostly like very much a separate process that, I mean, number one, I honestly am more of a words person than an art person, so I like it that way. But also, I think that it provides that respect for the art, because I think a lot of times in the industry, artists might seem less than authors, but that's not the case. I think that I see the trend now of elevating art more. Aaliya really did her work with The Gift of Eid and her research with it. Like, I respect her process of bringing her, like kind of insight and creativity, and I consider her the co-creator of these books. As a whole, it's been an absolute joy working with her. I see the sketches through my editor, I give input. One of the things I really insist on is having a Muslim illustrator. And I think that is really what makes me feel so comfortable, like being hands off, because I know that I can trust her with the Muslim character, the Muslim representation. I'm always blown away by the beautiful images that she does. And the art directors are really good. They help with bringing out the story as much as possible and being able to, direct the art to be as vibrant and age appropriate as possible.
As the National Book Award winner, what has been the impact on your career, and what has the reception been like in your community and those that intersect with yours and Kareem's identities, whether it's Muslim, being Syrian American, Arab, or refugees?
Absolutely. I mean, Getting Between definitely opened so many doors for me as a National Book Award winning title. I've gotten so many schools that reach out to have me do visits, and even locally, before it won, it wasn't on the Barnes and Noble's bookshelves. And after, like, now I walk into my Barnes and Nobles and my kids run and they grab it and they're like, look, it's here. So I think people seeing the speech, and it was shared on my our local masjid page, and everyone was like, oh my God, like you're, on a stage and giving a speech. Like it really, like, people were like, oh, that's a cool thing. You're an author, like you're legitimate. I'm just so glad that Kareem is reaching people's hands and the hearts and readers, and the reception has been amazing. I mean, every reader I think that like has contacted me has raved. I mean, not just like Syrian Americans who definitely have seen themselves, but even I had an Asian American child who told me, I'm not Arab, I'm not Muslim, but I related to this so much as an Asian American who feels in between his cultures, and has really like how important the book was for him. And I'm so grateful that it is out there, and I hope that it makes a difference in our world, inshallah.
Can you speak to the deliberate differences between your characters, their upbringing, and what specific characteristics you wanted to include in their narratives?
Yes, absolutely. You know, Amina and Kareem are such similar characters and yet so different too. And I think a lot of it is informed, like when I think about the character and like where they're born, how they were raised. You know, Amina was raised in Syria. She's new to America. And so you can kind of see that this is her first experience at not belonging. She's always been like a belonger in Syria. She is like everyone's very similar to her. So for her, this like you can see that kind of also she's younger. She's a third grader. She's 9 years old. She approaches with a little bit of like naivety and young, you know, optimism. Whereas like Kareem, you know, he is a little bit older. He has a little bit of that kind of middle tween desire to really fit in with his peers that does kind of manifest at that age. He's Syrian American, so you know, he's always felt between. He's never felt fully in a place. This is his home, but he also has always kind of struggled to navigate, you know, not feeling Syrian enough, not feeling American enough. And these characteristics of these two characters inform how they react when things happen around them. I often really think about like differences in myself as well. My Kareem is very much based on my own children who are Syrian American. This is all they've known. They were raised, and I immigrated to from Syria when I was a little girl. And although I was really young and younger than Amina, I do remember feeling those same feelings. I was in English as a second language class, or EAL now. And I remember struggling because, you know, I was sort of the translator for my mother. I'm the eldest immigrant daughter, you know, and not just the translator, but like the whole culture explainer, you know, all these different nuances are kind of different parts of myself that, you know, fit the story and the narrative to try to be as authentic to the story as possible.
We have a lot of appreciations for Emina for
Thank you.
her characterization, the familial relationships, the internalization that she has, and the impact that terminology has on students, like English as a second language as opposed to English as an additional language. So in this vein, what do you hope that students get out of Amina's narrative?
I really do hope to encourage empathy because these are really based on my own experiences. Like these are moments that I remember. And it's meant to be humorous, but they're very difficult, like these nuances of culture. And I would often, even as a teenager, like mess up things, like pronunciation of words, because I was more of a reader rather than, you know, speaking at home and stuff, we would speak Arabic. And you know, the I want to encourage empathy that, you know, kind of it doesn't mean you're not smart if you're not speaking English right. It doesn't mean if you're taking an English as an additional language class that you're a dummy, right? But you know, it felt like the right book to kind of show how Amina's interiority, as you said, was very much like feeling bad about herself, that all these were kind of signals that you're not intelligent, but she is intelligent. She's so, so smart. And I wanted to show that like language isn't always a reflection, right? Even if they spark just a conversation maybe, or just, you know, a small thing like where kids realize, okay, language doesn't equal intelligence. I hope that is what they leave the story with, you know?
All right, so Amna also shines light on the intentions of educators. What practices do you hope educators recognize or take into consideration and change in their practice?
Absolutely. I mean, my full respect to educators. I mean, educators are really doing so much, but I think as a person that grew up, you know, of a marginalized identity, something I realized was people of diverse groups get grouped up into a box. And we are assumed that we're all the same, you know, whether it's Syrian or a Muslim, you know, or whatever it is. And part of my intention with books is to kind of push back on that box. Don't assume, you know, don't assume religion, right? Like even with like hijab wearing, even with practicing, you know, but I kind of wanted to push back even on the label of what it means to be American through subtle character changes, pushing back on these stereotypes, pushing back on these boxes. And everybody has their own experiences and backgrounds.
So though Amina develops close relationships with few classmates, you introduce a larger cast of characters at the lunch tables. How important was it for you to share the particular commonalities and human connections in these scenes? And how did you decide what themes the characters would discuss and ultimately leading to the start of friendships and connections? Will we see more of these characters as the series goes on?
Absolutely. I love Amina's group of friends. They have my whole heart, and they're such a good group of like compassionate and kind children. And I wanted to model what I really want kids to have. And I want them to have this multicultural, diverse, friendship group that is so supportive. And I wanted to point out the similarities because I do believe that we all are so similar, right? Even through disagreement. And I wanted to show that, like, that's what allyship is. It's when you listen, it's not being like perfect. Like, none of us are perfect and we're going to make mistakes. And it's about listening as much as possible to each other and trying to respect each other. You will be seeing more. There's two more planned in 2026, and the friends are very much a part of that.
How do you hope that your work will impact the Muslim community directly? How do you hope your work impacts perceptions of Muslims domestically here in the United States and North America and globally?
I really, really hope that it creates positive change because I think that, you know, for a while before like October 2023, I felt like we had moved forward in American Muslim belonging. But after seeing the last year of a genocide against Palestinians, like seeing the way that it was justified for me just made me realize like how dehumanized Muslims and Arabs remain. And so my hope with my work is that it humanizes Muslims and Arabs and it creates change. And through education, through young readers, that every life matters. Everyone deserves due process. Everyone deserves their human rights. And that's what I hope my books do is they open up like a door into lives of humans and Arabs and show, kind of like humanize us a little bit. Like we need to feel each other's humanity because if we let go of our humanity, I don't know how to look for hope in the future.
Do you want to share a little bit with us about what you're working on?
So Sisters Alone is my next novel in verse, and it's due at the end of 2026. And it's about two sisters that are stuck home alone in a blizzard. And it's pitched as Home Alone meets Frozen. So it's a survival story, but it's also a story that delves into sister bonds and how to heal after grief. And then also one of the main characters has anxiety and intrusive thoughts, which is very, very important to me because I have anxiety and intrusive thoughts. And it was really important to me to talk about mental health. I don't want to give too much away, but that's kind of like where it's coming, and it's due end of 2026. And as I said, two more Amina Bananas in the beginning of 2026. I'm excited to share them with you all.
What is the best way to support Muslim authors, agents, editors, librarians, reviewers, other people involved in creating Muslim literature?
Yes, I mean, the consumers have such an impact. Having like a base of Muslim readers continue to pre-order, even if, and I understand like the economy right now is so difficult, but library visits are so helpful. They're helpful in funding the library. They're helpful in having librarians stock more of the book and creating a budget in showing the demand. These books are for our children. So I hope that Muslim readers can continue to seek out Muslim books, continue to support them, take them from the library or pre-order them, leave reviews. Like publishing is a business at the end of the day, right? So having like an audience shows that demand and will encourage publishers to publish more books and more authors. I mean, there's still very little Muslim books like on the shelf. So I hope that it expands and I hope that, our open doors will help open doors for other Muslim writers and that it becomes there more and more stories because there are so many more stories that still have to be told.
Publishing trends you like or hope will change when it comes to books being featured or books featuring Muslims?
It all comes down to storytelling for me. So Like, I know readers that have told me, we want more joy. And I agree. I think we need more Muslim joy stories because I think a lot of our stories are focused a little bit on the trauma. I really, really adore her books. My kids adore her books too, and make it joyful or sad or serious in all one book. So I'm always excited to see more. So I just want more books. I'm not picky on topics or trends. Write what you want to write and don't worry about the trends, honestly.
What are
Yes.
books that are currently on your bookshelf or your TBR list?
My TBR, I just read Huda F Wants to Know. One of my favorite writers is Zulfa Katuh, and she wrote As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. And she keeps teasing that she's coming out with more books, that a second book maybe at the end of this year. And I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I mean, it's already on my TBR, no matter what it is. But yesterday I read Sunrise on the Reaping. That was like such an impactful book. I would definitely recommend readers check out Fledgling, and I can't wait for book two. The end was devastating. I need to know what happened.
Are there any words of wisdom that you would like to pass on to young writers?
Yes, just keep going. Just keep, as Amina learns, make dua and put in the work, and inshallah you'll get there. I had a dream for so long to be a writer, and alhamdulillah, like it, I've been blessed with so many answers beyond my wildest dreams. So just keep working on your craft, work on your storytelling, perfect your, ability to write, and your dreams will come true, inshallah.